We finally have a resolution, but it's not exactly the news that Steelers fans were hoping for. Wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk, last year's second-team All-Pro with the San Francisco 49ers, is returning to the Niners on an extension. 4 years, $120 million over 4 years, $30 million per year. He got what he ended up wanting at the end of the day. And man, this is a crazy resolution to probably the craziest saga around one player I have ever seen covering the National Football League. Today, on this breaking news edition of Steelers Talk, I'm going to be breaking down the news here, and then we're going to get into what this means for the Steelers moving forward. So here is what Mike Garafolo had to say, breaking the news just moments ago, saying sources to me and Ian Rappaport, the 49ers and wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk have agreed to a 4-year, $120 million contract extension with $76 million in guarantees. So let's talk about this here because, yesterday didn't show up to practice. Today didn't show up to practice. There was certainly some hope in Steelers Nation that this deal could still get done. But, of course, it did not. So today I'm going to be talking about why it probably didn't get done for the Steelers and why the Steelers felt comfortable with the price that they set and the wide receivers they have in their wide receiver room as it currently stands. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already, because this is why you subscribe to the channel. When breaking news happens, whether it's good news or bad news for the Pittsburgh Steelers, we are going to get you guys a video right away for free, right away on the channel. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I appreciate all of your guys' support. So earlier today, Ricky, who was kind of, the person that, originally said that he was going to be a Steeler, posted this photo of the white smoke indicating that there was going to be a decision on Brandon Aiyuk today. Now, a lot of Steelers fans on Twitter were getting really excited that a trade was about to happen, but Ricky also did report that the Niners offered him a contract worth $30 million per year. So at least in that vein, that ended up being correct, all right? But at the end of the day, Brandon Aiyuk, and, the more that this really drug on, right? The thing that I kept thinking was he wants to be a 49er, because if he already told the 49ers he didn't want to be there, he would have been a Pittsburgh Steeler. He would have been a New England Patriot. He would have been a Cleveland Brown. He would have demanded a trade. He never really did that. He just requested a trade. And then the longer it went on as well, the more it kind of seemed like Pittsburgh's offer wasn't going to be enough, because if it was enough, I feel like a trade probably would have happened. But obviously with San Francisco in hindsight here, dragging this thing as long as it ended up dragging, it definitely makes sense to think that, Pittsburgh's offer, whatever they did offer them, was just not good enough, and they would have rather taken the $76 million in guarantees over the next 4 years, $120 million total over those 4 years, then trade away Brandon Aiyuk in a crucial year for their franchise. They're trying to win a Super Bowl this year. Obviously, without Aiyuk, their number one receiver from last season, Brock Purdy's favorite target, that would have been very, very difficult to get done without Aiyuk in the building, especially if you would have traded him for like a second-round pick and a fourth-round pick, right? So this is definitely a situation where I've said from the very beginning, the smart move is to pay Brandon Aiyuk his money, all right? So eventually the 49ers wised up here and got the job done. He's an excellent receiver. I would have loved to have him in Pittsburgh. But at the end of the day, it was the smart move for San Francisco to pull this trigger, and thank God it is finally over. Now let me know down there in the comments section, what is your one-word reaction to Aiyuk staying with the San Francisco 49ers? This will be the pinned comment on today's show. YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here in just a couple of seconds, and when that happens, take advantage of that time by answering today's pinned question. So here is what the Steelers wide receiver depth chart looks like as of today. And the fact that the Steelers were pretty much only willing to trade for Brandon Aiyuk at their price, which wasn't good enough for San Francisco, so that definitely tells you this would have been an absolute fleecing if the Steelers would have ended up making this trade. What that tells us is that the Steelers feel very comfortable with what they have in their wide receiver room right now. And George Pickens, who led the league last year in yards per reception, all right, the most efficient receiver in football, with Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, and Mason Rudolph throwing him the football. So obviously, the Steelers feel like they have a legit number one guy in their building. If not, I think they would have pulled the trigger on more potential draft capital, and they would have raised their price to get Brandon Aiyuk a couple of weeks ago. But they stayed firm because they know that George Pickens can be the guy in this offense and be that A.J. Brown type player that A.J. was in Arthur Smith's offense in 2020 when the Titans were the number one seed in the AFC. You also have Van Jefferson, who had a really good training camp and really good preseason. I've seen a lot of people disrespect Jefferson because, let's face it, he hasn't had the best overall production over the last 2 years. He's been injured. When he's been on the field, he hasn't been the most productive, but he is a really good fit in the Arthur Smith offense. He's big, over 200 pounds. He's a really good run blocker, and he's really fast. He ran a 4.39 heading into the league at the combine. So he's somebody with reliable hands. He's a decent route runner. He had some awesome routes during the preseason, and I think that Van Jefferson is somebody that they view as their number two receiver and somebody they feel comfortable with playing that Corey Davis role in this Arthur Smith offense. You also have Calvin Austin III, who is smaller. He's not going to provide much for you on early downs in terms of being a run blocker. However, he is somebody that gets open against man coverage consistently, and he can take the top off the defense. So he's going to play that role. And don't forget, guys, this team drafted Roman Wilson in the draft this year because they believe in his future. They believe he can be a future number two receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers moving forward. And by the way, Roman Wilson has had a personal connection to Mike Tomlin for a very, very long time, going back to high school. Mike Tomlin knows Roman Wilson extremely well. He talks very highly of him, and we didn't see a lot of him in the training camp this year and in preseason at all because of that injury that he took early on in Latrobe, but they believe in Roman Wilson, and because they didn't land Aiyuk, expect to see Wilson get a lot of opportunities here during the 2024 season. And I really do think, guys, that when I look at this situation, I think that, like I've said before, the Steelers didn't feel like they needed Brandon Aiyuk, okay? They didn't need him. They felt like the guys in their room, George Pickens, Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin III, Roman Wilson, those four guys are going to get the job done. Plus, let's not forget, you got Pat Freiermuth, one of the best receiving tight ends in football, and he's going to be a big part of this offense as well. So I think you have to put it into perspective here that the Steelers are going to be a very run-heavy offense, okay? It's going to be heavy play action. And because of that, you don't need necessarily multiple elite route runners on your team, right? I mean, Arthur Smith made it work with A.J. Brown, Corey Davis, Nick Westbrook-Akine, and a bunch of nobodies in Tennessee. They were the number one seed in the AFC that year. Now, I'm not necessarily saying the Steelers are going to be the number one seed or anything like that this year, but they obviously feel comfortable with what they have because they didn't make any waiver claims. They didn't get Noah Brown. They didn't get Tim Patrick. They said, hey, man, if you want to trade us Brandon Aiyuk for 75 cents on the dollar, we'll take an all-pro receiver at a value. But if you don't want to do that, we're perfectly fine with what we have. I guess time will tell if that decision is the correct one for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And again, guys, this is a big deal for Brandon Aiyuk. It's a big deal for 49er fans. 4 years, $120 million, $76 million guarantee. I'm guessing we're going to learn in the coming hours who kind of caved. Was it Aiyuk? Was it the 49ers? What happened in the final hours to get this thing done? But at the end of the day here, Brandon Aiyuk will not be a Pittsburgh Steeler, at least not this season, signing a 4-year extension with the San Francisco 49ers, $120 million total, $30 million per year annually, and then $76 million guaranteed. Now make sure you guys shout out your guy down there in the comments section. Name a wide receiver that you think the Steelers should sign or trade for here now that Aiyuk is not going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. I know there's going to be a lot of DK Metcalfs in there, John Mechie's, a lot of those things, guys. But if I'm being honest with you, I don't think the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to make a move for a receiver, at least not until around the trade deadline. Reason why I say that is because we're already past roster cuts. We're already past waiver claims, the early ones, that is. And if the Steelers really felt like they needed a wide receiver, they would have already gotten one, plain and simply. They just felt like they wanted Brandon Aiyuk at a value. They felt like they were in a good spot to get this done and that San Francisco would eventually cave and give and send Aiyuk to Pittsburgh. They felt like they were the only team in the running, that San Francisco was desperate to get rid of him, and obviously that ended up not being the case here, and Aiyuk will be returning to San Francisco. But make no mistake, the Pittsburgh Steelers feel good with the wide receiver room they have right now, and they feel comfortable heading into the 2024 season. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. I'll probably have some more takeaways, some more thoughts later this weekend here, talking about the conclusion of the Brandon Aiyuk saga. We can all take a collective sigh of relief here, guys. It is finally over. I think we can all agree the 49ers made the right call here, keeping their number one receiver. It just seemed like a no-brainer move from the beginning, but now just a week away from NFL kickoff, they finally get it done. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button, because if the Steelers make a move for a receiver or whatever the case may be, we're going to be covering every single minute of the Steelers 2024 campaign right here on Steelers Talk. So make sure you click that subscribe button, and until next time, here we go, Steelers.